Kash Patel didn't walk into that Senate hearing as just another nominee. He walked in as the warning sign people didn't realize they were seeing. From the very first question, something felt off, something that made even seasoned senators lean forward in their seats. It wasn't the tone he used. It wasn't the polished way he spoke about protocols and chain of command. It was the way he avoided saying one tiny word that should have come instantly, the way every FBI director before him had said it automatically, no. And that missing word will go down as one of the most important moments in modern political history.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Mr. Patel, to you and your family, congratulations on your nomination. And we had a constructive conversation last week. I appreciate your taking the time. In particular, a conversation about the prosecution of the World Cup bombing in Uganda that took the life of a Delawarean whose family I knew. I found moving. But the role you've been nominated for is central to our security as a nation, central to the protection of our constitutional rights. And I voted to confirm Trump's previous FBI director, Chris Wray. I believe he's lived up to the Bureau's motto of serving with fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And I also think my vote for him and for many of Trump's cabinet in his first term shows I take my constitutional advice and consent role seriously and do not reflexively vote against his nominees. I look at three factors when I assess a nominee: qualifications and experience, policy views and whether they're in the best interest of the American people, and character and capacity to do the job independently where called for. My colleagues have referenced quotes from Attorney General Barr, National Security Advisor Bolton. The FBI is enormous, 38,000 agents, $9 billion budget. I am troubled by your lack of senior law enforcement leadership. We disagree on some important policy views, but the thing that bothers me the most is a whole series of statements you've made in a variety of settings that suggest you would struggle to be independent from White House direction or control, as has long been the modern history of the FBI. Who does the director of the FBI work for, Mr. Patel?
Senator, thank you for that question. The immediate report for the director of the FBI is into the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. Then that report is taken into the Office of the Attorney General and ultimately the White House and the chain of command there.
So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice and has been the long-standing application.
And who does the Department of Justice work for?
They're in the executive branch, as all members do at the White House.
Attorney General Bondi gave a different answer when I asked her the same question, that they work for the Constitution and the American people. President Trump's made clear in public statements he wants to use the FBI to persecute political adversaries. He's publicly said that folks ranging from Liz Cheney to Adam Kinzinger to former Vice President Harris should be investigated and criminally prosecuted. If President Trump were to order you to open an investigation into any of these individuals, let's say Vice President Harris, would you?
Senator, this question speaks directly to my ability to leave political bias and allow independent behavior to be the only guiding light. As a public defender, I learned that in the harshest of arenas. And any law enforcement investigation, if I'm confirmed at the FBI, will only be launched on the following qualification: a factual, articulable, legal basis to do so. The president has said publicly that he will allow the FBI to remain independent, and I have said as much as well.
So if FBI agents brought to you a factual, legal basis, predication, and you are about to refer it to a prosecutor, and you get a call from the White House saying, don't proceed. This is a major donor. This is someone close to the president. This is inappropriate. What would you do?
Simple. I think you answered it partially in your question. The line agents, the brick agents who are trained to bring investigations on behalf of the FBI will make that decision-making process, and they will only have my full support so long as it upholds absolutely every value of the Constitution, and that's it.
So your predecessor, I went back and looked, and I asked the same questions of Director Comey and Director Wray. Director Wray, quoting former Attorney General Bell, said, "You should be willing to resign, if necessary, over conduct if you're pressed to engage in it that's unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional. If pressed by the president, would you resign?"
Senator, my answer is simply, I would never do anything unconstitutional or unlawful, and I never have in my 16 years of government service.
Would you be willing to resign the post of FBI director if pressed and given no choice but to obey the order or resign?
Senator, I will always obey the law.
Does obeying the law require you to, as Attorney General Bell said, as FBI Director Wray said, refuse the order or resign?
I'm not familiar with the extent of the law that you're referring to, but my answer is simple in my 16 years of government service. We will simply follow the law. And I've done that in Obama Justice Department, in Republican Justice Departments, in the Obama military, in Republican civilian capacity. I have never once wavered from my constitutional oath of office.
Mr. Patel, your predecessors in this role have been clear that they would be willing to resign if forced or directed to do something unethical or illegal. I'll proceed. One of your past statements that's concerned me, it's both a post on Truth Social and something you said in a podcast, the Sean Morgan report, that your predecessor, Chris Wray, has broken the law. We need to prosecute him. The FBI should go after people like him. And the month before this, in July 2023, you said there should be a criminal referral for FBI Director Wray. If confirmed, are you going to follow through on these previous statements that Director Wray needs to be prosecuted?
Senator, this reminds me of the conversation you and I had, which I greatly appreciated. There is enough violent crime in this country and enough national security threats to this country that the FBI is going to be busy going forward preventing 100,000 overdoses, 100,000 rapes, and 17,000 homicides.
We agree that prosecuting violent crimes should be the principal focus of the FBI. What I'm trying to get to, Mr. Patel, is a whole series of very troubling, to me and many other statements you've made about instead using it to pursue those who might be viewed as political opponents.
And as I told you in your office, I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. There will be no retributive actions taken by any FBI should I be confirmed as the FBI director. I told you that in your office, and I'll tell you that again today.
Thank you for that statement. As the co-chair of the Law Enforcement Caucus with Senator Cornyn, one of the things I've worked hard on, and I hope to continue being able to work hard on, with this administration is partnership between federal, state, and local law enforcement to pursue violent crime. You did say, as my colleague asked, and I look for a longer answer, that you want to close the FBI Bureau's headquarters on day one. How would shutting down the FBI headquarters impact its ability to prosecute violent crime and drug traffickers? How is that possibly a serious proposal, Mr.
Thank
Patel?
you for bringing that up and allowing me to answer. It was to highlight the significantly greater point that I was actually making in that interview, which is well documented over and over again. 38,000 FBI employees, 7,500 FBI employees work in the Washington field office and Hoover building alone. If you increase that aperture just slightly to encompass the national capital region, that is 11,000 FBI employees work in the national capital region. A third of the workforce for the FBI works in Washington, D.C. I am fully committed to having that workforce go out into the interior of the country, where I live, west of the Mississippi, and work with sheriff's departments and local officers, and having one agent prevent one homicide, and having one agent in Washington prevent one rape. And I will do that over and over and over again because the American people deserve the resources, not in Washington, D.C., but in the rest of the country.
And Mr. Patel, frankly, if that had been your statement, that would be something that would be defensible. It's the rest of it, saying you're going to turn it into a museum of the deep state, that causes repeated questions and concerns from people like myself. Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Most viewers missed it. Most people scroll past clips of hearings like this every day. But what happened in those 30 seconds wasn't just political theater. It was the quiet sound of the guardrails shifting. Senator Chris Coons asked Patel a question that wasn't hypothetical, wasn't abstract, and wasn't complicated. If the president ordered him to open an FBI investigation into a political adversary, in this case, Vice President Kamala Harris, would he do it? That question is a stress test of American democracy, a pressure point that exposes whether the highest levels of law enforcement still operate under the Constitution or under the wishes of one man. Every modern FBI director has answered versions of that question the same way. They said they'd refuse. They said independence comes first. Some even said they'd resign on the spot. But Patel didn't say any of that. He didn't reject the idea outright. He didn't say no. Instead, he wrapped his reply in layers of legal phrasing and polite ambiguity, talking about articulable predicates and factual basis, almost as if the question itself were a technical misunderstanding rather than a constitutional alarm bell. And that's exactly where this story begins, because when someone can't say no to power before they get it, what do you think happens after it's handed to them? Patel walked into that hearing as a nominee, but he walked out as something much bigger, the final piece in a strategy that's been years in the making. To understand how we ended up here, you have to look beyond that single exchange and see the entire architecture behind it. What happened in Trump's first term taught him something. Back then, the conflict with law enforcement was explosive, public fights, dramatic firings, and constant headlines. But all that drama only revealed a painful truth for him. Replacing the director isn't enough if the entire institution underneath them still believes in rules, tradition, and independence. So the strategy changed. Instead of battling the FBI, you change the FBI from within. You pick someone who doesn't have to be told what loyalty looks like. Someone who already sees the world through the lens you want. Someone who believes the system itself has been corrupted and therefore needs to be reshaped. That's where Kash Patel comes in. There have been rumors for years, interviews, podcast clips, and posts where Patel suggested that the FBI leadership worked against Trump in the past. Reports claim he believed the so-called deep state tried to undermine the presidency. Some commentators even said Patel was preparing a list of officials who should face consequences. Whether every claim is true or just speculation, one thing is undeniable. Patel has publicly accused former FBI Director Chris Wray of wrongdoing. He said Wray broke the law. He said the FBI should go after people like him. At one point, Patel even said there should be a criminal referral for Wray. These aren't normal statements for someone later nominated to replace him. They're signals, signs that Patel saw himself not as a custodian of the Bureau, but as its fixer. And that made his confirmation hearing feel less like a job interview and more like a quiet turning point. Because when Coons pressed him on who the FBI works for, Patel didn't emphasize independence. He didn't talk about constitutional duty. He didn't mention the American people. He recited the chain of command like he was walking through bureaucratic instructions. The director reports to the Deputy Attorney General, who reports to the Attorney General, who reports to the President. It sounded technical, harmless, almost boring. But that's the danger. When the structure that protects independence gets described like an HR chart, it becomes easier to bend. Every FBI director before Patel has stressed the same thing. They are insulated. They operate under the executive branch, but they do not take political orders. They don't serve the president. They serve the law. They serve the Constitution. That firewall is the reason the FBI can investigate political corruption in any party. It's the reason directors can say no. But now, that firewall didn't just crack, it got reframed. Patel turned a constitutional safeguard into a flowchart. And the senators in that room knew exactly what that meant. There was another moment in the hearing that told the same story. Coons reminded Patel that every previous director, from Comey to Wray, acknowledged that if a president ordered them to do something unlawful or unethical, they'd resign rather than obey. Patel didn't say he'd resign. He didn't embrace the standard that guided directors for decades. He repeated the same phrase, "I will always obey the law." But what does the law mean when the people interpreting it are political loyalists? If the Attorney General redefines what's lawful, and the director says he follows the Attorney General, then independence becomes an illusion. All someone has to do is move the fence line, and suddenly everything is legal. That's the danger here. Not open defiance, but quiet compliance. Not breaking the rules, but bending their meaning until they serve something else entirely. And if you think that's an exaggeration, look at countries where democratic norms eroded. It never starts with mass arrests or dramatic coups. It starts when institutions redefine their purpose, when the law becomes flexible, when the people in power say they're just following procedure, even as that procedure slowly changes. Patel used calm, professional language in that hearing. He came across composed, even respectful. And that's what makes this so effective. This isn't the loud, chaotic turnover from years past. It's precise. It's intentional. It's dressed in legal vocabulary. And because of that, many Americans won't see the shift happening underneath. Imagine a system where the FBI technically follows the law, but the interpretation of the law keeps drifting toward political goals. Imagine investigations that quietly disappear because the director doesn't prioritize them. Imagine cases that suddenly accelerate because they align with current political narratives. None of this requires breaking the law. It only requires redefining what the law is said to require. You could even claim everything is being done by the book, as long as the people writing the book think loyalty and legality are the same thing. This is why Patel's past statements matter. not because they're explosive, but because they show a worldview that fits perfectly into that strategy. When someone believes the FBI was part of a conspiracy against a president, they're more willing to correct the institution from the inside. Analysts have warned that Patel's comments about prosecuting Ray weren't just insults. They were signposts directing us toward a future where law enforcement is used to settle political narratives rather than pursue objective justice. And when Patel refused to say the word no during his confirmation hearing, it told every senator exactly what that future looks like. The slow part is what makes it dangerous. You won't wake up one morning and see political opponents in handcuffs. You'll see gradual changes, a shift in priorities, a chilling effect on dissent, the quiet sidelining of certain agents, the promotion of others who align more closely with leadership. Investigations might start or stop for reasons that technically sound valid: resource allocation, insufficient evidence, national security concerns. But if you pull back far enough, the pattern forms a picture, and most Americans won't catch it. Because outside the spotlight, political influence doesn't roar, it whispers. It moves through memos, briefings, case selections, and priorities. It lives in the spaces where discretion and interpretation overlap. By the time the public sees the results, the internal culture has already changed. That's why Coons pressed him so hard. His tone wasn't dramatic. He wasn't trying to score viral clip points. He was documenting something for history. The exact moment when the principle of independence became negotiable. When the role of FBI director shifted from saying no to power, to explaining how obedience and integrity could somehow coexist. That's the part that should make every viewer pause. Because now, Kash Patel isn't just a nominee. He's the director. He oversees surveillance, investigations, intelligence, counterterrorism, everything. 38,000 employees work under him. A budget of $10 billion. The power to open cases, to close them, to prioritize them. And he gained that power after refusing to commit to the single safeguard every director before him upheld without hesitation: the willingness to refuse the president. The next years won't look like chaos. They'll look orderly, professional, controlled. Press conferences will emphasize the law. Public statements will insist on neutrality. And underneath all of it, the definition of neutrality will quietly shift toward political goals. Justice won't vanish. It'll be reinterpreted. And the terrifying part? It'll feel normal. When Patel says he'll follow the law. The real question isn't about the rules. It's about who writes them, who interprets them, who benefits from them, and whether anyone left in that system will have the courage to say the one word Patel couldn't. Democracy rarely collapses in an instant. It dissolves slowly when people stop paying attention, when institutions stop resisting, when leaders replace independence with alignment. That Senate hearing was a moment worth remembering, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. If you're watching this, don't let it fade into the noise. Keep this conversation going. Share it. Talk about it. Question it. Hold on to the idea that law enforcement independence isn't optional. It's the foundation of everything. And if you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because staying informed is the first step in staying free.